Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and today is November 26th. We are recording this show, episode 91, Stewart Park Revitalization Part 2. We had Part 1 last week, and what that show was about, here, let's get down to it, was a public meeting that was held by the Friends of Stewart Park. Stewart Park Revitalization Plan public meeting held on November 18th, so that was like a week ago. And lots and lots of stuff was covered, and mostly last week we covered just the first half hour of the public presentation at Cinemapolis. We covered the history of the park, the history of the motion picture history, the Renwick Park history back more than 100 years ago, and then Stewart Park pretty much up to the present. And this week we are going to do the middle part of the story. We're going to go from what's been going on lately in Stewart Park. That's going to be the first part. But let's take a look at where Stewart Park is. Here we are again in the Cayuga Lake watershed. This is from the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network, cayugalake.org. You might want to check that out. Showing all the sub-watersheds. Let's go down to the southern end where Ithaca is. And the bottom of the lake, you can see there's Fall Creek, sub-watershed, the watershed of Fall Creek coming into the southeast corner of Cayuga Lake, and it happens to be right where Stewart Park is. Now we'll go to this aerial photograph by Bill Hecht in this whole south end of the lake, the north end of the city, and the upper right of the, well, right center, I should say, that triangle between Fall Creek, there we go, zoom in there, Fall Creek going across the bottom of the picture, angling up to the middle left, separates Stewart Park, and then the lake is on the northern part, and then the Route 13 highway is on the eastern side, on the right-hand side of the picture. Stewart Park is a section right along the shore, and here's another aerial view by Bill Hecht, and that's the area developed along the shore. And the part below that is the Renwick Woods, Renwick Wild Woods of the Fuertes Bird Sanctuary, established by the Cayuga Bird Club many, many years ago, about a century ago. So this week we are going to continue the story from the Friends of Stewart Park. So I'm going to start off with Rick Manning, who is the executive director. He will continue telling the story of what's going on now.
So we were successful in getting a planning grant from the Tompkins County Tourism Program, and we did the first rehabilitation action plan. Following that, the trail was constructed in Stewart Park, and we think that's been a great thing for the park. Then we completed a building study after that, where a lot of the buildings were looked at in sort of a conceptual level, but in some detail. And now we're doing a third study where we're trying to bring that all together and updating it. One of the recommendations of the first plan was that we form a Friends of Stewart Park, and in 2011 we did that. This is the 2009 report. Some of the work here is still good. And just a couple of, before we get into the projects, I just want to say it's been a great thing that the fireworks have come back to Stewart Park. I want to thank the mayor and also Vicki Taylor-Browse. I don't know if she's here, but she's a book between her and the mayor. There's been a huge effort to make this happen. Friends of Stewart Park has been supportive of this as well, and it's been a wonderful thing for the park. I also want to thank Ryan McCune, is Ryan here? And the Chamber of Commerce for bringing movies back to the park. I don't know if you've had any opportunity to go down there this summer, but there were some great events, Saturday night movie events. They were very well attended. It was really wonderful evenings in the park. And also predating the Friends of Stewart Park, Dan Mitchell and Ithaca Beer led a huge effort to take on some painting and work in the park, and I think you can see Scott painting up here. But these were very important efforts in kind of helping Friends of Stewart Park get going and just taking on really making some improvements that are kind of shocking to look at what it was like before now, actually. But Tommy Mann did a huge amount of work, and Dan Mitchell was really just sort of single-minded in wanting to improve the park, and we really appreciate all the work that he did. You already saw that. Okay, so now some completed projects. The Cayuga Waterfront Trail, as I mentioned, connecting the farmers market. We think it's been a wonderful improvement to the park, brought a whole new group of users in. And we'd like to complete the loop. As you know, there's a wonderful loop in the Gas Park, and we think people like to walk around parks, so we'd like to sort of have the trail do that in the future. And it's been a wonderful way to, Phase 3 has made a whole new connection for people that live downtown to get to the park on bike and by jogging and walking. And I particularly love the section along Pier Road. So the access to the park, excuse me, access to the park has been improved, but also accessibility in the park. And this is an important theme for the Friends of Stewart Park, and we'll talk about the playground in a minute. But it's, I think it's really begun a whole revitalization of the park, bringing a lot of new people down there, and bringing a lot of new great energy into the park. So some of the plantings, I think, it's nice to see new native plantings along the water edge. I've really appreciated that. Trowbridge and Wolf did the design for this and did a fine job. This is sort of a look at the area where we'd like to put the waterfront trail in. And it might look something like that. And if you build it, you can the trailhead was just opened in that location, and it's sort of a standard, one of our standard, the fifth and last trailhead with our kiosk, interpretive panels, bike racks, benches. We had a ribbon cutting there just the other day, and a nice story is that it was dedicated to Stu Stein. Many of you know Stu was so instrumental in getting our Tompkins County tourism program going. We had a great attendance on a rainy day. The flagpole garden is sort of our big landscape success story for Friends of Stewart Park and the Chamber of Commerce. I showed you these images before, what it looked like back in the day. It had fallen into disrepair. Early in the 1980s, the city DPW put in this concrete block wall. You could question the design of it. I'm sure it looked nice at the time and it was new, but then 30 years later it also needed to be repaired, so we tried to find out more about the history and the configuration of it. We got together 5 mayors, actually, Carolyn Peterson, Bill Shaw, Alan Cohen, and John Gutenberger. I think John's here, actually. Along with Judge Bordoni, who lives in Florida, had a fundraising effort. We raised about $30,000 to build the structure of the garden. I also wanted to mention Danny Wheeler, who did this incredible volunteer work. He's done a lot with the cemetery and a lot of the war memorials in DeWitt Park. He's actually up painting the flagpole. He's a very dedicated man, and we really appreciate his help. So here's the structure of the garden. We had 2 ribbon cuttings for this event, one at the time of the construction of the hardscapes. And then the Ithaca Garden Club got involved and funded and designed and installed this planting and did, I think, a beautiful job with it. Beverly Hillman's here. She's on our board, and notice her raking patterns. She's sort of the closet Japanese garden. But Beverly has been instrumental in a lot of our landscape efforts in the park and along with the Ithaca Garden Club, and our ribbon cutting with both Savanti and Carolyn Peterson. And we think it's beautiful and added a whole new flavor to the park. We've also added bulbs and are very pleased with the way that looks in the spring when we need a little color. The city stepped up and rebuilt the Tea Pavilion. It was condemned, I think, in 2011. And there was some discussion about what we should do. Should we rebuild it? Should we buy some park pavilion and put it up there? And the city was encouraged by the Friends of Stewart Park, certainly, to rebuild it, and they stepped up and did it. It was not an inexpensive thing. In the research, Claudia Brenner and Bert Fortner did the design, and you can see that this is the historic shot where there were railings around it and it was higher. When it was moved, it was actually put in flush, and I'm not sure why, maybe it was accessibility reasons, but anyway, we brought it back to its original height, and there's a design for it with accessible ramps on 2 entrances. And it's almost complete now, and I'm sure many of you have been there, and it's been a beautiful, the city did a fantastic job, and we really appreciate their commitment to this. We've done park entry planting. So this is looking at plan view of the area that we want to plant. We'll talk a little bit about signs as well. Sorry, guys. So this is Beverly with Rob and Tony, the city's crew. The city's, I don't know if Jean Grace is here, but the city has an amazing crew now, Streets and Facilities, that's really doing a fine job in the park and really helping us in our efforts. This is when they were preparing the beds for planting. After the planting was done, which was very quick effort, we had a lot of volunteers, a lot of garden club members, and all the planting was funded by the Ithaca Garden Club for this. And this is a look just a few days ago when a lot of the grasses are starting to take shape. Next year it'll look much nicer, but it's a really great start. We've also planted bulbs just during Into the Streets a few weeks ago, so that'll look nice in the spring as well. And we'd like to put in a sign here. It's a little out of place, I guess, but we've been talking about where a sign should go, and we think that this would be a good place for it. Picking up on some of the detailing in the stone columns, the historic stone columns with stainless steel relief lettering, and maybe, I don't know, what do you think? Do you like this? Okay, everyone who likes that, raise your hand. And, oh, sorry. Oh, how about that? I think that's good. Okay. All right. Community design at its best. We've also been working with the Cayuga Bird Club, and we, as you know, I told you the story of them helping to leading the effort to save the Renwick wildwood. We put in an interpretive panel. This was designed by Iron Design. Dave Nutter, who's here, did a lot of the historic research and writing, as he's done on many of our birding panels. But basically it tells the story of the habitat that's there, the story of saving the wildwood from the bulldozers, and also the kind of birds that you find in the different habitat areas within the Renwick wildwood. And this was installed in June. It took us a couple of years to do this, actually. And that was the ribbon cutting. We think it's a beautiful addition to the boardwalk, which is also a wonderful feature of the waterfront trail. Diana Riesman and the Motion Picture Project have led an effort to do 3 interpretive panels on the historic buildings in the park. And here's Savanti at a ribbon cutting for the Wharton Studio, which historically was known as the Dance Pavilion. And they've also done one at the Boathouse and at the Picnic Pavilion. These are installed, they're beautifully designed by art and anthropology. And we're very pleased. We think that signage is a relatively easy, inexpensive way to tell important stories to the building and send a cue that these buildings are important and deserve to be well maintained and enhanced. Now, a lot of projects that are underway, and I'm going to cover some of these, and I'll introduce a few other guests as well. We'd like to restore the picnic pavilion, or what you might know as the large pavilion. It's really the public face of the park. It's where people rent it. We've all been to many parties there, I'm sure. And historically, you can see it had the railings, kind of like the tea pavilion. A beautiful design with 7 arched windows that open up with swinging double doors. But it had fallen into disrepair. Dan Mitchell did a lot of carpentry on this building, particularly on the back end before he painted it. But there's a lot of needs in this building. I mean, it's almost comical in a way if it wasn't sad, so sad. But The restrooms have been shut down all summer because there was some rotting that occurred. The city is stepping up and has designs that are going to be going out to bid any day now. So they'll be up and running next year. But you can see the historic urinals have kind of, they're a little uncomfortable for us guys, you know, and I think that those will be gone, we hope, and also the windows need to be replaced. We had talked about actually replacing them with new ones. Now we're looking at restoration. We think that most of the elements of those buildings are restorable. There may be a couple of doors that would need to be rebuilt and reinstalled. But and then when you look, the women's restroom isn't a whole lot better either. There's lighting that is very unattractive in the building. The painting, there's just a lot of work to do in this park. We think it's about a $350,000 project. We've received $75,000 from the Strategic Tourism Planning Board to begin that work, and the city is stepping up with a substantial amount of money for the bathrooms. But I think it's a priority project. It really is the public face of the park. It's probably where most people go when they go to a building in the park. And we think it's, in the scheme of some of the other building projects, it's something that we can do in the short term, and we'd like to get this done within, I don't know, 2 to 4 years. And we also are talking about, this is a simulation of a little addition on the back of the building, sort of like a Russian doll idea. Now this is there. We'd like to have another pop-out that would take some of the program, the boating program, from the DPW pavilion where the Wharton Museum is going to go. So there's been some preliminary study done of this, and there's more work being done on that by architects involved in the project.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at plans for the Wharton Studio Museum, which show the history of the Wharton Motion Picture Studios that was there at Renwick Park, later Stewart Park, 100 years ago. But now we're going to look at what plans there are to turn the other building near that large pavilion or performance pavilion or dance pavilion, whatever you want to call it, across the parking lot. There's a building that's used for storage and so forth. Plans are to convert it to a museum about the motion picture industry. So we are going to now listen to Diana Riesman, who is the executive director of Wharton Studio Museum. And you can find out more on their website, which is simply whartonstudiomuseum.org. So let's go listen to Diana.
The Wharton Studio Museum. Diana will come back and take the floor again for this.
Okay, so I think I'm going to throw my notes away and kind of go with the slides. So these are some current views of the Wharton building, Wharton Studio building, which is currently used by the city's Department of Public Works for park maintenance, as well as by the Ithaca Youth Bureau for storage for much of the things that they use for their summer camp. And let's see, I think, do you want to go to the plan? Oh, here, so this is a shot of the interior bay. This was the main part of the studio building. And what you're looking at are original tracks in the ceiling. We think they're scenery tracks or some other tracks, but these are all original. And we definitely, when the museum is in the building, we definitely, of course, want to preserve anything that is original, such as these tracks. There are a couple of columns, also original columns for the building. So just to give you a brief history of the Wharton Studio Museum, we did start, Rick referred to us as the Ithaca Motion Picture Project. We incorporated in 2009 as the Ithaca Motion Picture Project with a mission to preserve and celebrate Ithaca's silent movie history. And we wanted to transform this former movie studio into a motion picture museum. So we have spent the last many years broadening people's awareness of the silent movie history and trying to garner support for a museum in the former studio building. This is a concept designed by our architect Hans Wiegard for the future museum. It really pays homage to the original design of the building in many ways. Both this building and the large pavilion, the picnic pavilion, were sister buildings, but the columns are no longer part of this building. And we feel that in a way we would be bringing back this building to its original use. It wasn't a museum, but it was a film production studio. And this project, along with the playground that you're going to hear about, along with refurbishing the large pavilion and the Cascadilla Boathouse, are really cornerstones of the park's revitalization. This museum has the potential to be a new and vibrant cultural, educational, and recreational or tourist destination, not only for Ithaca, but for the county, the region. And what we plan, can you go to these are some of the exhibits that we have done. In 2011, we did a countywide exhibit called Romance, Exploits, and Peril, when movies were made in Ithaca, in 8 different spaces. In the library, that's Susan Curry up there. We had this undulating 80-foot exhibit of silent movie history in the library. We had an exhibit at Gimme Coffee on West State Street. And we had this movie screen playing films with some text and graphics at Cayuga Medical Center. And so this is an example of some of the exhibits that we would possibly do. And what we envision is gallery space for a permanent exhibit on the history of silent film and Ithaca's role in that history, gallery space, small space for changing exhibits, workshop space, a meeting room. There would be a cafe that you could see in the rendering. Right on the corner, which would be just a wonderful thing to be able to sit by the lake and enjoy something to drink. And the building is beautifully situated right by the lake, right by the Cayuga Waterfront Trail. And I really think that people on the trail who are perhaps just walking and taking in sort of the natural beauty will feel compelled to come in and learn about what's going on in the Wharton Studio Museum, this film history, and at the same time, people who are just there maybe to go to the museum will be drawn to the Cayuga Waterfront Trail and will discover the natural beauty of the park. So we are working in partnership with the city of Ithaca, happily, towards a license to the building, and we are so happy to be collaborating with the Friends of Stewart Park on this endeavor.
Okay, so we're going to finish off. We won't be able to see this whole segment, but the Pavilion Performance Plaza between the two buildings, there are plans for that, and also the waterfront for performance space in the park. So we'll go back to Rick Manning, and he'll start telling us about that. We only get part way through it, so we'll continue it in another episode, but you'll get the idea.
For Friends of Stewart Park, it's really important to have this kind of a central piece that we think is a destination and kind of a focal point. I mean, obviously there's a lot of interesting elements to the park, but this is very unique, and having the opportunity to be able to also display the history of the park, something about the natural history of the area, the birding opportunities. I think there's a lot of other potential uses for that kind of space as well that would complement the Silent Film Museum. I wanted to talk to you about the area between the pavilions. Whoops. That's in the wrong place. But, so currently, what I consider as a landscape architect, the most important area of the park is sort of the worst area of the park. Between the two historic pavilions, where the water tower was and the band shell, is a parking lot with a fire hydrant right here, and it's the sort of focal point. And then there's a, oops, sorry, technology. And then there's this old swimming ramp. So that's what this is and it wasn't put in on center, but this was at some point boathouse changing rooms, and then this was a swimming ramp to get out into the water. So I'm not sure why it wasn't centered, and maybe that doesn't matter so much, but we'd like to restore this area, make it beautiful again. In the waterfront plan that was done in the 1990s, this is a drawing that was done by Peter Trowbridge that shows not so different than what we're looking at now, really, a paved plaza that picks up on the old design of the arcade that was never built that connected the water tower to the two pavilions. Just some pleasing, simple paving pattern in that area. We've had some design workshops looking at other ideas and kind of come back to that idea of trying to bring back the historic plan and imprint it onto that plaza. And this is sort of where we're at the moment. What we'd like to do is to do just that, to restore the pathway network that was there with the waterfront trail loop tied into that. We'd like to put in eliminate parking here. They'll have available to cars if needed or for service vehicles. We're thinking about adding parking in this area so that it will service this building and replace the parking lost there. Maybe a little bit of new parking behind the building as well. It's a close-up, actually. And then this area above is possible area for a lake overlook and perhaps a band shell, and I'll show you some images of that. This is the existing waterfront trail running through here, slightly reconfigured to accommodate a future band shell. So this is how we're thinking this area might look, and if we really want to improve both buildings, it seems fitting that we also improve the plaza between them.
Okay, well that's all we have time for now, but we'll continue that in a future show when we complete this story from Stewart Park, the Friends of Stewart Park. And there will be other information too, like inclusive playground and spray ground area. That should be sort of a model facility. You can get involved in that Saturday, December 6th, location to be determined. There's going to be a public, helping the public come in and help with that planning. Rehabilitating and revitalizing the Cascadilla Boathouse, painting the horses in the carousel, and bird-friendly park initiative. That's what we've got coming up at Stewart Park. So catch us again, walkinpark.com to see all the shows, and thanks for joining us.